Hi guys, this is Connie, back for more Connie Reads the Dogs of Winter. This is chapter 13, titled Lucky. The rain stopped. The days grew cold. I shivered in my sweater and hatless head and mittenless hands. The people in the streets rushed from one place to another to escape the cold. They did not want to stop long enough to reach in their pockets. The cold and our empty pockets infuriated Rudy. "Why do I waste my time with you worthless pack of dolts?" he said. "You're useless. Useless!" He spat at my feet. "You particularly. You think just because you're little and you're younger than the rest, you don't have to pull your share? You think you're too good to steal." "Come on, Rudy," Tanya said, touching his shoulder. "Mish doesn't eat much." Rudy slapped her hand away. "And you," he roared. "You think you're too good to go with men, do you?" He shook Tanya until her teeth rattled. "It's time, Tanya. Just you wait and see." Pasha coughed and coughed. Rudy whirled on him. "Stop it! Stop coughing!" Pasha wiped his nose with the back of his hand. Pasha wiped his nose with the back of his hand. His hand came away, streaked with red. On warm days, Pasha and I begged in the parks and squares in hopes that the sun would bring the lunch eaters outside. But not so many came out anymore, and if they did, they were reluctant to part with their money. "Soon we will leave the train station," Pasha said. I watched a brown and black dog approach a woman with her small child sitting on a bench. "Why would we leave?" I asked. "When winter comes, the police make us leave the station." The dog wagged his tail and grinned up at the woman and child. They say too many bombsy and vagrants stay in the train stations in the winter to keep warm. The child laughed and clapped her hands. The mother ignored the dogs. "But we aren't bums," I said. "We are children." Bombsy, vagrants, street children, it's all the same to the militia. We're cockroaches, all of us. We have to be driven out. The dog laid his head in the mother's lap and gazed up at her, his whole body wagging back and forth. I held my breath. "We have places to go in the winter to keep warm," Pasha said. The woman smiled and petted the dog's head. I laughed and clapped my hands. "What kind of places?" I imagined the police taking us to places with blankets and hot soup and coats. "Underground," he said, "next to the steam pipes where it's warm as toast." The woman broke off part of a sandwich. She handed it to the child, who fed it to the dog. The dog took the chunk of bread and meat gently from the child's small hands and then licked the child's fingers clean. I rubbed my finger over and over the black button in my pocket. Pasha punched me in the arm, in a not mean way. "It's not so bad, Mish. It's warm and mostly dry. People feel sorrier for us and give us food. Sometimes the church people come to the plaza and feed us soup and bread. Sometimes they even bring cast-off clothes and shoes." "Is it dark down there?" Pasha shrugged. "Sure, but we have plenty of candles and stuff. It's fun. A lot more fun than my old home in the countryside. All we had to eat was the stuff we fed the cows and the goats. Here it is much better." "What about your mother?" I asked. "She must be looking for you." Pasha flicked the side of his neck with his finger. "She was a drunk. So was my father. As long as they had vodka and each other to yell at, they didn't care about me or my brothers and sisters. The last time my father beat me, I struck him in the belly with a knife and left." I sucked my breath. "You stabbed him?" Pasha nodded. As much as I hated him, I could not imagine sticking the bad man in the stomach with a knife. A man with brown boots and shiny buckles dropped a coin at each of our feet. "Thank you, sir," I called to the legs and boots walking away. Pasha flipped his coin in the air and caught it in his teeth. I laughed and clapped. "Do it again," I demanded. And he did. The brown and black dog rose from the feet of the little girl. He shook himself and then trotted across the park as if he had an important appointment to keep. The days grew colder, and there were more coats to watch. But I did not watch the coats so much anymore. I watched the dogs. They were everywhere. Curled up in doorways, sleeping on heat grates, riding the trains, crossing the streets one way and then the other. They begged. They stole. Sometimes they found a kind person, and sometimes they were cursed and spat upon. They were just like us, only they were not like us at all. I watched the dogs steal from the sausage cart or from the lunch bags left on the ground. I watched them beg from women and children and old men. I watched them tipped over garbage bins behind butcher shops and grocery shops. And always, always they shared. The small ones ate, the sick ones ate, the old ones ate. That is how it was with the dogs. On a hard day, a bitter cold day, I sat huddled next to a steam grate in the sidewalk. The cold made my eyes steam tears. I told myself they were not tears for my mother. They were not tears for the weeks it had been since I'd slept in a bed and taken a bath. Perhaps it had been months or only days. I didn't know or care anymore. The tears were only for the cold. I bowed my head and rested it on my knees. Something warm pressed against me. Warm breath stroked my cheek. I lifted my head. There beside me stood a large brown and black dog. The dog sniffed my hair and ran his warm, wet nose across my cheek and ear. I held my breath. Did the dog think I was something to eat? Satisfied, the dog curled up at my feet next to the steam vent with a sigh and closed his eyes. We sat like that together, the dog and I. People rushed past us and around us and stepped over us. A woman in a blue coat stopped and handed me 2 coins. A man in a black coat and white collar gave me his sausage sandwich and hurried away. The dog wagged his tail hopefully. I broke the sandwich in half and shared. Coins dropped at my feet and in my hand. 1 coin, 2 coins. The dog and I trotted across the street to the potato man's cart. The coins jingled in my pocket. "Please, could I have 2 potatoes?" I said, holding out coins. The potato man fished 2 plump hot potatoes from the metal pan. He handed them to me in a piece of newspaper. I handed him the coins. He studied me for a minute. One eye looked me up and down while the other eye wandered off to a more interesting scene to the far to the side. He grunted and fished out another potato. "For your dog," he said. I laughed. I could not believe my luck. 3 potatoes? I heard my mother say, "Remember your manners, Mishka." "Spasibo, sir," I said. "Thank you very much." 2 hot potatoes to warm my hands and another in my pocket. 2 hot potatoes to fill my belly. The dog and I trotted back to the steam grate. I took the potatoes from my pockets and started to stuff one in my mouth. The dog let out a low woof. He wagged his tail. "Please forgive me," I said. I broke the potato in half. He took it gently from my fingers and swallowed it in 1 gulp. And still, I had 2 warm potatoes. I smiled at the dog. I reached out and touched his shoulder. "You've brought me luck today," I said. He licked my fingers. I laughed. "I'm going to call you Lucky." Lucky stretched and sniffed the air. He looked at me and then trotted off. "Wait!" I cried. I dashed off after him, the potatoes bouncing in my sweater pockets. He looked over his shoulder and slowed to a walk. I ran up beside him. My breath came in frosty puffs. I had not run in a long time. We children mostly sat and lay with our hands outstretched. "Where are we going, Lucky?" I rested my hand on his shoulder. I followed him to the corner of 2 busy streets. Lucky sat down and looked up and down the street. A child on the other side of the street, dressed in rags and 2 big shoes, darted in and out of traffic. Tires screeched and horns blared. I had seen Pasha and Eula play this game of chicken before with the cars. "That girl is stupid," I said to Lucky. "My mother said to always wait for the green light, or for the light to turn green." Lucky looked up at me and wagged his tail in agreement. We crossed the street when the light turned green. We trotted past empty buildings with their windows either broken out or boarded up. We trotted past big, shiny buildings with fake women in the windows wrapped in warm fur coats. We trotted past other dogs sleeping in patches of warm sunlight. Sometimes they opened their eyes and barked a greeting. Sometimes they slept on. We passed other children begging and sleeping on newspapers, or sitting in doorways drinking from bottles. Lucky swerved around 2 older boys fighting on the sidewalk. One tried to grab my arm. "Hey you," he snarled. Lucky whirled and growled, showing the boy long, white teeth. The boy backed away. Finally, we stopped outside a tumble-down shop at the end of a long alley. It may have once been a bakery, or a barber shop, or a grocery store. Now it was nothing but bricks and weeds, except it was where Lucky was going. He looked at me. Then he went around the side of the building. He let out a low bark, and then he disappeared through the weeds and through the bricks. I gasped. How could that be? Was he a ghost? Then I heard one bark, then another bark. I walked closer to where Lucky had disappeared. I heard a high whimper and a soft mewling. I pushed aside the weeds and laughed. Lucky was not a ghost dog. He had not walked through the brick wall. There, covered up by the weeds and rubble, was a small opening in the wall. An opening just big enough for a dog or a boy to squeeze through. Lucky, I called into the dark opening. He answered with a bark. 2 shining brown eyes and a black nose appeared in the opening. Woof, Lucky said, and then he wheeled away into the dark. I looked up the alleyway. The 2 fighting boys walked past, still arguing. Fat white snowflakes drifted lazily down onto my head. I peered into the dark place where Lucky had gone. I could walk back up the alley and across the street and pass the other dirty, sleeping, fighting, begging children, and back down to the train station where Pasha would be in his own dream place with a brown paper bag on his lap, and Victor with his rat face, and Tanya with her sad eyes, and Eula with her cigarettes and men in dark suits. I dropped to my knees, wiggled through the opening that was just big enough for a dog or a small boy, and slipped into the pocket of darkness and onto the dirt floor. And that's the end of chapter 13. Be careful with that and enjoy, please and thank you, and I will see you for the next chapter. Bye.